where we will profile South Africa's fund managers, bringing us their views on everything from investment strategies to just what makes them tick. Joining us today is Herman Marais. He's the Chief Executive at Agri-Vie Fund. Herman, thank you for making the time to join us. Looking at your profile, more than $100 million invested to date over the last 6 years. Maybe just give us an overview of your investment philosophy. Herman, this is Nozipo in Johannesburg, hoping you can hear me. Looking at how much you've invested in the last 6 years, in excess of $100 million. What's your investment philosophy?
Nozi, good evening. Agri-Vie is a lower mid-market private equity investor in the food and agribusiness sector of sub-Saharan Africa, mainly focused on East and Southern Africa. Our basic investment philosophy is to partner growing food and agribusinesses across the value chain and spread over certain selected subsectors. Essentially, we offer our institutional investment partners an opportunity to participate in the fast-growing African consumer market through the channel of the food and agri value chain.
Herman, it's Wayne here. 2 questions. What sort of investor demand is there out there? Are lots of people interested in investing in your fund? And the second question is, I'm very positive about the future of African growth and specifically the future growth of African agriculture, because essentially it's the last place in the world that's still got enough arable land to produce food. How do you see that progressing? I mean, are we going to have an agricultural revolution in Africa? Is it still 10 years away, 20 years away? What's your views on those 2 subjects?
I think you're absolutely right. I think as we speak and as we work, we see this revolution, so to speak, unfolding. The fundamentals driving this process are very strong and they remain strong. It is built on some of those fundamentals that you mentioned, being located in a region of the world where there is undoubtedly the most potential to increase productivity and to feed both the region and increasingly feed the world. So there are very strong fundamentals driving that growth story. Investing in sub-Saharan Africa and investing in a particular sector called food and agri has not been the traditional forte of most investors. So it is a reasonably recent phenomenon, but we have seen in our own work and in the build-up of investor interest in the fund offerings that we are responsible for a very consistent and steady build-up in investor interest. Initially coming particularly from the development finance community, but increasingly also from commercial and other long-term investors.
Herman, given the importance of a really conducive policy environment to resuscitate an agricultural sector, are you getting a sense that African governments are keeping up the pace in terms of tweaking their policies so that investors want to get into that space, and in the process ensuring that there is an attraction towards value chain financing for all the players along the supply chain?
It is a varying picture. Particular countries are doing particularly consistent work from a public policy and public investment perspective. Ethiopia is one country that comes to mind. Others are stronger in words and weaker in terms of deeds and follow through. But generally speaking, I would say that there is a trend through the region of policymakers and infrastructure investors showing a better understanding and commitment to create the enabling environment for private investment in these value chains in food and agri.
And Herman, when you look at agriculture, you obviously know more than I do, but what I understand about it is that it's just scale, the same as essentially every other business. What are the hindrances in Africa, and maybe even particularly in South Africa, to truly getting massive scale where it's not just effectively a family operation and thousands of very small farms? To compete against the American grain farmers, you have got to have proper scale.
Well, I speak from the perspective of a private equity investor that typically invests in vertically integrated businesses involving both primary agriculture, but importantly also and predominantly other parts of the value chain. Speaking from that perspective and looking at the supply of primary production through agricultural activities, I think Sub-Saharan Africa presents certain challenges in terms of making that a reality and a success reality. Yes, scale is extremely important, and that is where eventually the efficiencies and the volume will come from that makes price competitiveness possible relative to other production regions in the globe. In Sub-Saharan Africa, where, as you correctly said, the pattern of small-scale farming is so prevalent, we probably don't have an option of going large-scale commercial agriculture alone. If we pursue that route on its own, we will probably bring about an unwanted social upheaval, which the subcontinent cannot really afford. The secret probably lies in the coexistence of both large-scale commercial agriculture and smaller-scale operators. And several countries and operations, even some of those in our own portfolio, have shown that there is a strong business case also for large-scale commercial agricultural operators to operate in a symbiotic relationship with an outgrower program or other small-scale producers and even other supply chain operators. So that cooperation certainly is going to be important. The rest of the sector and industry promotion agenda lies in things like a conducive regulatory environment. And what I would like to emphasize particularly is human capital, that the sector needs more qualified middle management to operate these commercial farming operations, and also to operate the processing factories and the other enterprises in the value chain that also needs to develop to make the sector the success that it can be and will become in Sub-Saharan Africa.
That's the Agri-Vie Fund in focus, and that's it for Investment 360. A big thank you to Herman Marais, the Chief Executive at Agri-Vie Fund.